Chapter 3. What is the fundamental idea of disease? And what is it to heal disease in ourselves or others? We lay it down as a fixed principle that there is nothing in the body that has not a prior existence in the mind or the soul. This truth is recognized by Swedenborg in his Science of Correspondence, which expresses the relation of material things to spiritual things. He says that not anything in the mind to which something in the body does not correspond, and this which corresponds may be called the embodying of that. True Christian Religion, 375. The condition of the body, and the same is true of all matter, is always an effect, of which something in the soul is the cause. There is not a motion, or action, or any conceivable condition of the corporeal organism that is not due to some antecedent action or state of the mind, by which we mean always the principle of thought. In case of accidents or chance occurrences, there is always the relation of cause and effect, for it is inconceivable that a thing should occur without a cause, and all causes are mental. Suppose a splinter is inserted in our flesh by what we call an accident, how it will be asked, was the mind the cause of that, since it occurred without our thinking of it? I answer that we both thought and willed what led to it. The body did not place itself in the situation where alone such a wound could be received. If it was the result of an action, such as handling a rough piece of wood, the mind alone was the cause of that act, for surely the body did not move itself. Both the body and the splinter were passive. The only active cause was the mind. And the same is true of all disease. The essentially vital organs in the human body are the heart and the lungs, and these have an immediate correspondence with the mind. In fact, the fundamental correspondence between the mind and the body is seen in the correspondence of the heart to the love, or the emotional nature, and of the lungs to the understanding or intellect. The two departments of feeling and intellect constitute the whole mind, and all mental action is included in them. And every change of our feelings or emotions is instantaneously translated into a bodily expression by a change in the action of the heart, and consequently by a modification of the circulation of the blood. But this, if continued for any considerable length of time, must of necessity affect the vital condition of every organ and tissue of the bodily structure. The lungs in their action respond to the intellect, and their movement is always the exact representation of the state of the intellect. Respiration is the primary movement of the body, and is that on which all other movements depend, and there is an importance attached to it that few ever stop to consider. Whatever affects the respiration must influence every vital action. Respiration corresponds to the understanding, consequently to the state of thought, and likewise to faith, because faith is a state of thought. Every change of thought affects a modification of the action of the lungs, as in the act of listening, consequently of the respiration, and this must of necessity affect all the physiological movements and functions. Hence, an act of faith inaugurates a change in the action of the lungs, which is communicated as an impulse in the direction of health to every part of the body. So, also, fear, and every abnormality of the mind, affect the action of the heart and lungs in the direction of disease, for the movements of the heart and the lungs are primary movements on which all others depend. Hence disease must be considered as the translation into a bodily expression of a prior enharmonic of thought and feeling. All disease resolves itself into this in its last analysis. We shall not go far from the mark in our diagnosis of any malady when we pronounce it a case of the divergence of thought from a divine rectitude, a deflection of the mind from the real truth. Thought and feeling make the mind. In other words, the what we are, and all that we are, is but the gathering up into a personal and human form of all that we have thought and felt. Thought and feeling are never in reality separated. Feeling is thought in its boundless and formless universality and indefiniteness. Like the original chaos, or primal cosmic matter, it is of itself waste and void. Thought is feeling defined and formulated and taking a particular direction. All feeling, whether it be a sensation or emotion, is of itself meaningless. Thought, as an activity of the intellect, gives it meaning and quality and form, in a word, a local habitation and a name. On this philosophical principle, stated by Swedenborg, that the wisdom, or intellect, is the form of the love or feeling, and by form is meant not merely shape, but quality, hang great practical consequences. A patient should be instructed that his feelings in and of themselves have no significance. It is only our way of thinking which makes them mean disease or health. On that pivot our destiny turns. Thought and existence are absolutely identical and inseparable. To think is to exist is to think. As thought and existence are one and inseparable, it follows that any change in our way of thinking must, by a necessary law, modify our existence. Hence disease, which is an abnormal mode of existence, and its radical significance is a wrong way of thinking, or, if you prefer to so call it, a misbelief. The universal life principle, or ground of our existence, is feeling. But being of itself and standing alone a pure indefiniteness, it is without form and void. It takes form, or, what means the same thing, quality, from thought. Hence it is a principle as fixed as the eternal laws of the mathematics, that as I think, so I am. Thought shapes our whole existence, and, like the helm of the ship, determines our course on the ocean of life. Disease is a mental inharmony, disquietude, discomfort, dissatisfaction. It is, as the word means, a state of unrest. It is an unbalanced mental condition. To get a clear conception of this, it is necessary to remark that the mind of man is dual, that is, each degree of our triune nature is made up of wisdom and love, or intellect and feeling. The inordinate predominance of either department over the other is inharmony. That is, it is a loss of equilibrium. In nervous maladies, and these include a very large fraction of all chronic ailments, there is a great preponderance of the feelings over the intellect in the mental life of invalids. They are all feeling, and the intellect is dormant. This mental inharmony expresses itself in the body. Corresponding to the two departments of our mental nature, intellect and feeling, there are two kinds of cerebral substance, the sensory and motor, and two distinct classes of nerves, nerves of motion and those of sensation. In disease, the nerves of sensation become morbidly acute, and the nerves of motion correspondingly weak, with a disinclination to motion. Of course, the cure must consist in the restoration of the lost balance. But the bodily condition is only the external expression of the mental inharmony. Hence Swedenborg, in accordance with the law of correspondence, by which all outward things signify and represent internal things, or things of the mind, says that the cure signifies to restore the spiritual life of man. Because disease and sickness correspond to the state of man when he declines from the truth to the false, and from good to evil. Arcana Celestia, 9031. In another work, he affirms that healing signifies reformation, that is, reformation by truth derived from good. Apocalypse Explained, 284. It is the forming anew of the inward man by the truths of faith. Goods and truths, or states of feeling and thought, are so real that the inward man is nothing but his own goods and truths, in which take on the human form. Arcana Celestia, 10,298. The imparting spiritual truths to a patient, to take the place of his psychical or sensational illusions and fallacies, forms or reforms the inward man in the image of the heavenly, that is, of health and harmony. The healing of disease is the creation, or generation, or evolution of a new man. The spiritual man, the Sanskrit manas. The psychical or unspiritual man or mind, with all his fantasies, must be dethroned, his empire of sin, or error of the understanding, must be subverted, and the dominion is to be given to the new and higher man, the Christ within, who must reign until all enemies are put under his feet. As it is expressed by Paul, the Christian philosopher, we are to put away, as concerning our former manner of life, the old man, formed by those appearances of truth which belong to the sensuous or animal range of the mind, and which waxeth corrupt after the lusts or desires of deceit, and we are to be renewed in the spirit of our mind, and put on the new man, which after God is created, by the truths of faith, and righteousness, and the holiness of truth. Ephesians 4 verses 22 to 24. In another place he enjoins upon us the putting off the old man, the sensuous mind, the external shell of our true being, with his doings, and the putting on of the new man, which is renewed unto knowledge after the image of him that created him, and in which new man Christ is all, and in all. Colossians 3 verses 10 and 11. As the body is formed of the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe, so the new man in Christ is formed of the spiritual truths we imbibe. The material body thus made is mortal and subject to constant change, to disease and death, but the new man is immortal, unchanging, and undying, and exempt from disease and unhappiness, by virtue of its inherent immortality. This is the cure of disease to some purpose, and health becomes identical with regeneration. The fundamental idea of health is integrity or wholeness, and this completeness consists in the perfect balancing of the departments of intellect and feeling, or the masculine and feminine elements in human nature. So long as these are out of due proportion and stand unreconciled, they are the occasion of sorrow, suffering, want, and bondage. This condition is the parentage of evil. But when they are harmoniously blended and act as one, they generate and bring forth harmony and health. Perfected man is androgyne, that is, male and female in one personality. The union of the two in a harmonious synthesis is what is called, in the Kabbalah, the house, as in this passage. Through wisdom is a house built, and by understanding it is established. Proverbs 24 verse 3. Idra Sutta, Sector 312. When these two elements are separated, or one is greatly in excess of the other, it is a state of inharmony, an unbalanced condition, and this is mental disease. Jesus refers to this when he says, "A house divided against itself shall not stand." The two conflicting elements mutually destroy each other. This state of antagonism between the two component elements of the mind was represented in the Kabbalah symbolically by the union of the man and woman back to back, that is, each looking in a direction opposite to the other, and this was evil. It is not good for man to be alone. For all of truth in us that is not united to its correlative good or emotion comes to naught, and all of good that is not conjoined with truth has not in it the quality of permanency. This is expressed in the occult spiritual science of the Kabbalah thus. The male is a mere half-body, so also the female. Idra Sutta, Sector 718. Blessings descend not upon mutilated and defective things, but upon that which is complete, not upon half things. Idra Sutta, Sector 723. Half things neither subsist in eternity nor receive blessings for eternity. Idra Sutta, Sector 724. This was an idea familiar to Paul, who says, "The woman is not without the man, nor the man without the woman, in the Lord." 1 Corinthians 9, verses 11 and 12. When the two departments of intellect and feeling are perfectly balanced, and there is, as Swedenborg would say, the marriage of good and truth, it is a condition of perfect mental equilibrium. Health, or wholeness, is represented by the balance, or scales of justice, in a state of equipoise. In all diseases there is a loss of balance. Usually the feelings, either as emotion or sensation, are greatly in the preponderance, and this hyperesthesia is always a state of weakness, and accompanied with a disinclination to motion. The principle here unfolded is one of great practical importance in the treatment of disease by the mental method. Spirit and matter sustain to each other the relation of male and female, that is, the one is active, the other passive or reactive. When they are joined back to back, to use a Kabbalistic figure, or are looking and willing in opposite directions, it is a state of war and mental unrest. When they are joined face to face, or look and will in the same direction, and consequently become a unity, it is a state of peace, harmony, and health. The opposition of the flesh to the reign of the spirit, this schism in human nature, the rending asunder of the higher and the lower degrees, and their coming into antagonism, is the fundamental idea in disease, which is first in the mind, and then by derivation in the body. The flesh, the lower and animal soul with its senses and selfish propensities, warreth against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. This is the fall of man, the lapse of the soul, and the great unhingement of human nature. The spirit, the Kabbalistic Karita, the crown, has the right of dominion, and the union of the two regions of our being, the reconciliation of the two warring extremes by the submission of the lower to the higher, is the true conception of the atonement, or atonement. And this can only be effected by sacrifice, the offering up of the lower animal and selfish soul to the spirit. This was signified by the various offerings of the Jewish ritual, the offering of animals to God. This had only a symbolic value and efficacy, and signified the surrender of the anima bruta, the animal soul in man, to the anima divina, the divine soul or the spirit. The divergence of the creaturely will, or that of the animal soul and its body, from the will of the celestial man, is the root of our mental and physical maladies. This is the condition of human nature everywhere, and of our human nature. This is what ails us in every disease. How we became so, and why, we need not now stop to ask. It is a fundamental fact in the spiritual science of disease. The restoring of this breach, the healing of this schism, the reconciliation of this contradiction, is the aim of providence, and should be of medical philosophy. If the lower animal soul surrenders to the divine spirit in us, the battle is ended, and peace is declared through the whole mental and physiological domain. As Jesus said, "If any man will save his soul, or tenaciously adheres to the life of sense, he shall lose it. But if any man will lay down his soul for my sake and the gospel, he shall save it." Luke 9, verse 24. If this surrender is not made voluntarily and at once, it is affected by suffering. This is the meaning of disease and pain. It is a summons to the lower soul under a flag of truce to surrender. Consequently, disease and suffering are not an evil, only as we think them such, but a good. What we call evil, as Fichte has said, is the best thing, and the only good thing for some, there is in life. In our inverted condition we call good evil, and evil, good. Emancipation of the inward and real man from a state of degrading bondage to the body and the senses is the universal remedy for disease. It is not the province of the body to say what I shall be or do. It is for me to say. It is said in that remarkable book, The Perfect Way, it is according to the divine order of nature that the soul should control the body. For, as a manifested entity, man is a dual being, consisting of soul and body, and of these in point of duration and function, and therefore in all respects of value, the precedence belongs to the higher soul. For the soul is the real, permanent individual, the self, the everlasting, the substantial idea, of which the body is but the temporary residence and phenomenal expression. The soul, nevertheless, has, properly speaking, no will of her own, since she is feminine and negative. And she is, therefore, by her nature, bound to obey the will of some other than herself. This other can be only the spirit or the body, the within and the above, which is divine, and is God, or the without and the below, which, taken by itself, and reduced to its last expression, is the devil. It is, therefore, to the spirit and soul as one, that obedience is due. Hence, in making the body the seat of the will, the man revolts not merely against the soul, but against God, and the soul by participation does the same. Of such revolt the consequence is disease and misery of both soul and body. The Perfect Way, or The Finding of Christ, page 216. But for this end is the Son of God, the Spirit in man, the inward Christ, manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil, or terminate the dominion of matter and sense, which are one and the same. As all the properties of matter are only sensations, 1 John 3 verse 8. Matter is not in itself evil. It is only matter and senses regnant, that is called the devil, the deceiver. It is the function of the spirit to break the reign of the senses and end their unnatural revolt. To rescue man from this unnatural domination of the lower nature over the higher is the aim of the mental science of disease and the mind method of cure. In order to effect this, it endeavors to educate men to a higher conception of the dignity and divinity of human nature. The ideas of things are positive, spiritual entities, and belong to the spiritual heavens. Between all the phenomena and appearances of nature and their ideas, there is the relation of effects to their causes. The living ideas of things, which are apprehended only by faith, necessarily precede and control all the phenomena of nature, including the various changes in the body of man. The ideas which we entertain of ourselves take form first in the psychical body, and through this are ultimate and reflected in the physical body. The condition of the physical organism is only the echo, the reverberation, of our ruling ideas and fixed beliefs. If we would modify the outmost in man, the change must commence in the inmost. Hence the importance of being able to form the correct idea of ourselves, and to think of ourselves rightly, as thought is the starting point of our existence. If we form an imperfect and distorted idea of ourselves, it will be reflected in the body as certainly, if not as quickly, as when a man distorts his countenance it will appear in the image of himself in the mirror before which he stands. We are commanded to think of ourselves soberly, that is, neither above nor below the true standard, as God hath dealt to each man a measure of faith. Romans 12 verse 3. Let us try, then, and take the true measurement of man as a spiritual and immortal being, that the outward body may be fitted to it as a garment of beauty. Someone on being asked how he supposed Jesus looked, replied, as he thought and felt. That was a comprehensive answer. It has its application to all men, and expresses a profound law of human nature. What is the divine idea of man? It is said and believed that God made man in his own image and likeness, and he must have thought of him after the pattern of himself. He has a higher idea of man than he is inclined to form of himself. Man viewed as a material being and weighed on the scales of materialistic science, and even in the popular theological balance, does not count for much, and is hardly worth saving. In opposition to this imperfect view, let us weigh in on the balance of the sanctuary, the divine standard, and gain, if possible, the true idea of him. For this true it will be as a sun. Its living influence will extend from the inmost in us to the outmost by an orderly progression and evolution. The lamp or lantern of the body is the eye, by which is meant the intellect of the spirit. If the eye be single, that is, sincere, pure, the whole body is pure. If the eye be evil, or there is a wrong and false idea, the whole body is darkened or affected by the falsity and the evil. If, then, the luminous principle be darkness, how great is that darkness? Matthew 6 verses 22 and 23. End of chapter.